Hello everybody, Wild Rocket here with you, and I'm going to talk to you today a bit about how it is to teach English in Japan for somebody who is approaching teaching children and adults from a very kind of spiritual, meditative perspective, from a very kind of psychological perspective, because I'm somebody who, as well as being very passionate about teaching languages, I'm very passionate about the psychology of the human body, the human mind. I'm very fascinated and committed to the health and the well-being of the human spirit and the human heart. And in my teaching, when I teach children, when I teach adults, when I teach junior high school students, when I teach high school students, my aim is to infuse what I have to offer with love, with compassion and understanding, and also primarily to harbour that love and compassion from a perspective of understanding the processes of others, of just listening, really. For me, really right now, as a teacher, as an English teacher in Japan, as a as somebody with a multicultural background, British and Arabic, British and Arabic, an international, spiritual, multi-dimensional being, really, I feel as if my role here in Japan as a teacher for a year is to be a loving and compassionate listener, to be understanding, and to, in my capacity as an English teacher, to really take a good look into what it is that individual students require, what they're interested in, why they learn, why they want to learn a language if they are old enough to have made the decision to take up classes independently. If they're young children, for me it's very much a kind of intuitive process. When I'm teaching children from ages 5 through 17, it's very much a process of listening to where they are in their lives, really taking into account where they are in their levels of consciousness, what's important to them, how they understand the world to be in terms of where they place their focus and priorities. And through that, I really try to adapt my attitude, my speech, my language level, but really the energy levels that I emit. With teenagers, I tend to use a lot of slang, and I talk a lot about my passion for video games, my passion for anime, for films, music, interests often very commonly associated with youth culture, which is a very important aspect of who I am. With adults, it tends to be more of a focus of the kind of more adult or intellectual aspects. We talk about things like politics, world affairs, traveling, making big decisions, sort of like managing the day-to-day routines of that encompass all the responsibilities of being grown up, from paying bills, from working a job, to going on outings, going on travel outings, dealing with issues that come up in day-to-day life, and how to approach that from a kind of more mature emotional perspective. It's really, for me, teaching is a very meditative experience. During lesson time, even with the young ones, with all the energy they have, and with the way that they're kind of tuned into source energy, and they act and behave very spontaneously and without concern for what other people think of them. My role as an English teacher in Japan, I would say, is very much a kind of ongoing meditation, really. It's interactive meditation. It's it's really kind of focused on the psychology of the people I'm with in the room, and that's really, I think, that's a really special and very meaningful place to be, I think, especially when you overcome and deal with the challenges, because I don't speak very much Japanese, and when you're teaching young children and even adults, a lot of what they're saying in the class is in their native language, which is totally understandable and fine. From a kind of foreigner's perspective, that can be challenging sometimes when you can't speak a lot of Japanese, even though I'm learning every day. But those challenges are oh so rewarding, because when you come up against those challenges, you see reflected back in them reflections of yourself that you need to work on. Like if I have problems communicating or getting a child interested in what I'm doing in the lesson, and if that's like an edge that comes up in the process of the lesson, that's a reflection for me to work with. And that, after my lessons, that really gives me a lot to think about. Okay, how can I make it more interesting? How can I bring in students into what I'm doing and really get them excited about just the activity, if not put aside the language learning goal for that particular lesson, be it teaching prepositions or months of the year, whatever the case may be. How can I bring them into the energetic flow of events of the activity, whether it's passing cards around a table and encouraging students when they get an answer right. I had a very big breakthrough recently with a student who, in one of my group classes of children aged between 7 and 9, one student who just for the first 2 months just didn't seem to like me at all. He would lose his temper very, very, very quickly every time we did something like vocabulary introduction and recaps. He would, even though I couldn't understand a lot of what he was saying in Japanese, he would rage up. He would look at me with a lot of anger and viciousness, with a lot of kind of intensity and anger and upset in his eyes and heart. And I'd been trying quite hard to kind of reach out to him, to encourage him, and to really give him a chance to shine, and to let him know that in my own way that it's okay. If you don't like me, that's okay. I don't hold it against you. You may have whatever reservations you might have about maybe it's me, maybe it's the whole environment of learning, maybe it's the very process, the very fact of learning English, maybe you're coming to English class after having been in school all day and you're just tired, and your mum gave you a hard time at home, whatever the case may be, to really let the child know that it's okay to let the anger out. But even if you let that anger out, even if you direct it at me or at other students, I still love you. I still think you are an infinite divine child who has so much potential in this world to be great, to be amazing, to be unique, to be your own self. And I've done this in practice by really encouraging this child, as I do with all children, but with him specifically, I've really tried hard to keep it light, warm, and really fun, and really try to between classes try to just monkey around, because this particular child is very, very children in general are quite rowdy and active, but this child is particularly rowdy and active. I tried to really kind of take advantage of that by just monkeying around between the lessons with this child who didn't like me at all at first. And my last lesson with him went really well, I think. A couple of weeks ago, he was saying, like in Japanese, like the English teacher isn't a complete idiot, but he really got into our last lesson, and he really enjoyed playing with me in between the lessons. He really enjoyed the card game that we did, even though he may not have felt completely confident about being put on the spot to speak English, but he tried really hard. And when I encouraged him, he felt so good. He was smiling, he was laughing, and when we were doing the pass the card game, he couldn't wait for it to be his turn. And to see a child who, you know, just didn't seem to like you much, really open up to you, open his heart to you, it was so beautiful. And after the lesson, his brother, he has a younger brother who's in kindergarten, and he was there with his mum while the lesson was going on, and he looked at me, and for the first time he made an attempt to communicate to me one-to-one, and he tried to say Basha sensei, you know. He pointed, and it's like brother, you know, brother, and he just looked at me with very emotional, just beautiful eyes, and yeah, it was really beautiful, and yeah, it was really, really wonderful. And yeah, I think moments like that really make teaching and living a very beautiful experience, you know. It makes living and teaching and realizing that when you get over those edges, those challenges, those energetic blocks, and you overcome them and you let kind of the love flow through, it's just the most beautiful thing in the universe. And it kind of just verifies and hits home for me the importance of love, the importance of compassion, of really being understanding towards other people. God knows there's so much suffering in this world. God knows there's so much anger, there's so much hurt. There are people who've been, you know, I used to think I had it tough, you know. I used to think I had it tough with some of the stuff that I've been through. And I've had a life filled with many ups and downs, God knows. But there have been people who have suffered things which you can't even imagine, really. And to really have compassion for everyone, because when people aren't kind to you, when they're horrible to you, you don't know the conditioning they've been through. You don't know what they've been through at home, what they've been through in their lives, how they've seen themselves, the lessons and the people they've fallen in with. We are so complex as creatures. There's so much love in all of us, but God knows there's also the inclination to be hurt. You know, when you open up, when you are so open with your emotions and feelings and what you're going through, of course, the risk of being hurt comes up. But along with that, if you shut down, you may protect yourself in the short term from being hurt, but you also really block out the opportunity to tune in to the highest forms of love there is. So I would say that, you know, vulnerability, embracing that, and really being open with what you want to do, with communicating who you are, what you're doing, and also encouraging others to be vulnerable and open, and to let their every voice within them, because we're all multi-dimensional and multi-voiced, to come out. When you do that and let them know that that's your nature, that you are anger, you are fear, but you are also love, you are compassion, you are understanding, you are abundance. And funnily enough, when people realize that it's okay to be all these things, they tend to be happier, they tend to be more loving, they tend to be more compassionate, because love builds, love always builds. And that's true in a solitary setting, that's true in a professional setting, whether you're teaching English, whether you're working in an office, whether you're working in a construction site, even basically any job in which interaction with human beings plays an important, you know, it's just the most important thing, and I can't emphasize it enough. So I think this is how I teach. I teach with very big consideration and of the psychological and the bodily process of the students that I have, and I really pay attention to where it seems they are in their lives and in their development, and I really try to tailor that to kind of them. I really try to encourage them to speak out. I really try to ask meaningful questions, to go beyond the superficial, like where are you from, how old are you, what do you do for a living, you know, what makes you passionate, what are you reading, what are you eating, What are you thinking about? What do you feel you're put on this earth to do? You know, what do you feel is your most highest purpose? What do you feel is what really rouses your spirit, you know, with the most basic language I can? And that's my role as an English teacher in Japan. I love it and I enjoy it, and even if I'm not an English teacher forever, I will always continue this considerate, compassionate approach to the best of my ability. This has been Wild Rocket with you with a video on how I teach English in Japan. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. It's winter time in Saitama Prefecture in the Kanto region of Japan. We're having a good time here. Life is good. Peace and be easy. Peace be with you all.